a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with a review of a recent debut novel that I read and absolutely loved, The Recent East by Thomas Grattan. Now, I don't know why more people don't love it. It had a great review. I didn't read any of the reviews until just before I pressed record on this video, but a stellar review in the New York Times and the New Yorker, and many of the points those reviewers raised I agreed with wholeheartedly, but I have my own thoughts as well. Most of it has a quite low rating on Goodreads, 3.57 or something, and a few of my Goodreads friends have read it and disliked it, or bailed on it. I've had comments from subscribers when they found that I was reading it, projecting it would be a bail, predicting I wouldn't like it. Well, I loved it. This is such a Shawn book, so I'm feeling a little bit intimidated to explain why I loved it, but I really loved it. Now, one of the things that occurs to me is, this is the Transnational novel. So Thomas Grattan's mother was a East German defector with her family, and that is part of the storyline here. It doesn't read as autobiographical fiction, or heaven forbid, for some readers, autofiction. It's just a shapely literary novel, but the germ of it comes from, I think, Thomas Grattan's family. So the transnational theme, I think some readers that haven't lived in more than one country just aren't interested, and they just aren't able to kind of engage. I'm thinking a lot about how much I love the short fiction of Mavis Gallant. She's one of my very most favorite short story writers, and all of her fiction, almost every short story she wrote over a 50-plus year literary career, was about expatriate and exile and returning home, and all transnational themes. One of the main characters is a gay guy, and I am not certainly, let me put this out here right away, I am not accusing any of my Goodreads friends who didn't like it of being homophobic. I'm not. I definitely am not. But I find that most gay fiction on Goodreads has a very low rating because most people who read are straight women, and there are a sizable number of straight women. I think it's a diminishing minority, thank goodness. Can't relate to the highly sexualized life that many gay men lead. And it's to their loss, because it's a fabulous storyline, and it's beautifully told here. There is quite a lot of dramatic incident here, and several storylines, but for me it is primarily a character-driven novel, and I loved the main characters. I loved most of them, but I loved the depth at which they were drawn on the page. Just a profoundly moral and psychological portrait of a family that for large parts of their lives together and apart were like ships passing in the night, but they don't stay that way. There are disruptions in their isolation one from the other. So I just thought this worked on so many levels. So the final thing that I will say, I feel that it's weird for me to start a review by kind of anticipating all the reasons that you might not like it, but I'm just so puzzled by the dislike for this novel. Perhaps the biggest reason that certain readers don't take to this novel is that the characters are weird, and especially the mother character. She is just so odd. And I loved her. I will never forget her, Biata. She is imprinted on my psyche. Some people don't like reading about kind of unusual characters, and she is so 3, if not 4-dimensionally drawn, and we see so many different facets of her character throughout all of the incident in her life and in this novel. I just loved her, but she's very odd, and there's a lot of strange things that happen. Even some of the characters, like her son, he's not such a strange guy, Michael, but he does do strange things. The daughter, Adela, she's strange in her own way too, but they're a little bit more normal than their mother. So, okay, I'm as beautiful as this cover is, I'm going to set it down because it's a little bit heavy. So when Biata is 12 years old, she was living in East Germany in 1968 with her parents, 2 professors, And they don't give her any advance notice, but they say, you've got 12 minutes to pack a small suitcase. We are going to the west. And I'm going to read you the opening page or something from the first chapter. And so they defect. And they go to, I think, Cologne at first. And then they go to England. And then they go to America. And as a 12-year-old, she is so strange. And I think it's partly because she's processing this upheaval in her life, that they're staying in a recently deceased old woman's apartment in Cologne, that the whatever the association is that helps defectors from the east kind of get settled in the west. And Biata, whenever she has a moment alone, just snoops through the house, through the dead old lady's clothes. She starts wearing the clothes, and she, you know what she does? She, I don't want to say too much, it's very early in the book, but just to give you an example of how unusual she could be in this novel, she named her daughter after this dead woman that she obviously never met. So she is a piece of work. There's many timelines, but 1968, much later, I think it's 1990, so the Berlin Wall has just fallen, and her husband, Paul, has just left her. And so she's got the 13-year-old son, Michael, who's not out to himself or anybody in the family, and the 12-year-old daughter, Adela, and they're really close, and then that doesn't last, or, comes and goes. It's kind of like a normal family, I think. She is, the word in the New York Times review was wan, which I thought was an interesting adjective to use. I would say she is just so stunned and muted and almost monosyllabic in her confusion, and it wasn't the happiest of marriages, but she's just kind of left not sure what to do at all. And so she doesn't really do anything, and then suddenly a letter comes that the family house back in the former East Germany is still there in this little town. Kritzhagen, I believe, is the name of the fictional town on the Baltic Sea. So she says to her kids, let's go. So they move to Germany to repossess the family home in this small town. And she just has a complete, I don't even know if the word breakdown is politically correct anymore, but she just stops functioning the moment they set foot in the house. And she doesn't, there's no electricity, the house hasn't been inhabited, probably since when she was 12 years old and her parents defected, and it's full of mice. And so her son and daughter, who are quite young, they take control, and she doesn't come out of her room except at night to walk around the town. And this goes on for weeks, and she just can't function. And so Michael explores the neighborhood, and so this is 1990, and East Germany there was a lot of devastation. I don't pretend to know much about it, but it's, I think, from the reviews that I've read, and there's no reviews from the German readers, but it seems to be historically accurate. And so it's kind of a ghost town. It's a lot of deserted houses along the street, and so Michael goes out and he just starts commandeering furniture and brings it into the empty, mice-infested house and furnishes the place. And when she doesn't really, the mother, Biata, she's just almost emotionally paralyzed for weeks and weeks and weeks. And during that time, a whole bunch of stuff happens, and I'm not going to get into any of that. That's enough of the premise for you to know whether that sounds interesting to you. But Michael comes out, starts to explore his sexuality, and I'm not going to say anything about the new character that comes in, other than that he's a cousin. And he becomes a really important character that influences the lives of all of these members of this family. Quite a bit later, it's maybe a couple years later, and I'm going to talk about it in very oblique terms only, so as not to give any spoilers, but there is a hate crime. And there was a lot of stuff with neo-Nazis and stuff that was, and I'm not an expert, but I'm vaguely aware of that, and that is covered in this novel. And the fact that the people that were part of the mass group that perpetrated the hate crime, I had grown to love them, care about them, and then this happens, and then the various members of the family react in different ways, and you have to read the book to find out. But it was so morally ferocious to have this happen in the center of the novel, And the novel, the story is very much preoccupied with this, as well as all the other strands, sexuality, exile and repatriation and all this stuff, but also the what motivates someone to act in such a hateful way when it could be a member of your family and you love them dearly and have done this stupid thing that they probably didn't think of anything to do with why they were there in that crowd. And it's just so well done. I'm going to be thinking about it forever. Here is the opening to the novel. I've looked up the pronunciation of the two German words here for mother, Mutti, and father, Vati. I think I've got it. 1968. Everyone talked about the West as if it were a secret. They leaned in to share stories of its grocery stores that carried fresh oranges, its cars with built-in radios. Covered their mouths to mention a Dusseldorf boulevard that catered to movie stars and dictators. Whole Eastern month's salaries spent on face cream. There were entire whispered conversations about its large houses and overstuffed stores, its borders crossed with a smile and a flick of one's passport. Some talked about it as if it were the most boring thing. Others, like it was an uppity friend. But everyone talked about it, also pretended it never crossed their minds. Whenever Biata heard these stories, she felt frightened, because its freedoms seemed vast, because each story said something different. The West, a puzzle she couldn't begin to solve. Now Beata's mother stood in her doorway, coat on, pulled back hair turning her face peevish and alert like a nun's, and told her they were going there. West, West? Biata asked. Saying at once will do, Mutti answered. Biata tried to decide if this was information or a joke, though her mother rarely joked. She finally settled on, we never go anywhere. A sigh lifted her mother's chest. You're just an old woman, Biata thought. At 12, Biata was already taller than her, close to the height of her father, who, when she stood next to him, often said, I used to be tall too, as if height were something like keys to lose track of. Mutti fussed with her coat's buttons. I should pack something, Biata said. I've packed for you already, her mother answered. We're leaving in 5 minutes. Wear something warm. On their one trip to Berlin, Biata had glimpsed the wall guarded by soldiers and barbed wire. At home in Kritzhagen, radio stations sometimes came in from Lübeck, talking about the same weather, but advertising brands she'd never heard of. She rifled through her closet. 3 minutes, Mutti called, then 1. Beata's stomach ached. She put on her favorite shoes, though they were a size too small. In the bus to the station, Biata sat wedged between her parents. She felt sick from its diesel smell and from the cobbles jostling her body. As their city smeared past, as her nausea rose and receded, Biata conjured the West. Streets with identically shaped trees, wares shimmering in shops. Its alleys boys at school talked about, filled with blowjobs and people so drunk they had no pupils. Biata wore a hand-me-down jacket, a fake brooch for its top button. She lifted the brooch to her mouth. It tasted bitter. Neither of her parents noticed what she was doing. Soldiers gathered in the train station where Biata and her parents sat. A pigeon strutted across the floor, pecking at crumbs and garbage. Beata's father looked even older that day, his thinning hair a dazzle of pomade, his stomach a spongy ornament. Her parents were professors, always dressed as if they were off to teach a class. That day, Vati wore a tie and cardigan, Mutti a mud-colored dress that seemed both disappointing and right. Well, I hope I've sold quite a few of you to at least give this book a try. I thought it was smashing. One of my top reads of 2021. Thanks for watching.